We are live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Game Audio Hour. It's our weekly podcast where I slide this thing down so I can read it and make it look like I'm actually looking in the camera. It's our weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences to audio secrets. Here's where you'll find in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. And again, this week we have a full panel, which is awesome to see. And established in the green room beforehand, I'm going to go first to the man that when you get the man, you get the horns, Jack Menhorn.
Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Hey, good. It's good to see you. How are you doing over there?
I'm very warm. It is 9 o'clock at night and it is 90 degrees.
Yeah, there's a heat wave everywhere except my backyard. Apparently, it's a nice 74 here today. You're welcome. You can hate me later. Speaking of good weather, Mike, how's it going?
Going well. By the way, should we call Jack Menhorn tonight? Do you think that can be our...
Menhorn? What?
Sorry, that's what I came up with in short notice. I'm doing great. Hope you're doing likewise. Great.
Good. How's the weather there? Is it hot? I'm, what, an hour north of you?
Yeah, no, I think it's maybe a smidge warmer here, but I can't... It's not within me to ever complain about LA weather other than during an earthquake.
And you are an hour south of me, but what, 10 minutes next to Vince? Vince, how's it going?
Oh, it's doing great. It's been pretty cool. You missed a really nice barbecue yesterday, by the way.
I know. Totally slipped my mind. I have to fess up to that. I wasn't paying attention, and I should have. Then I get a text from you or from Mike and saying, "Hey, I saw Vince there. Where were you?"
We're talking about the gang barbecue?
Yes, we are.
Oh, nice. A lot of people showed up?
It was cool. It was at Enon Zer's place this time around, and it was really quite fun. Hung out with some old dudes. Hung out with a lot of young dudes too. But hey, we're still in the intros here.
Hey, I'm going to go right to Damian, and I'm going to go to Alex last. Damian, our special guest, joining us all the way from Seattle. He's getting moved in. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going good. We got a whole West Coast contingent up on this hangout, and representing the north side of the West Coast. It's been beautiful. I've been here about 3 weeks, and I don't know, false advertising, pretty much been sunshine, blue skies the whole time I've been here. So
That's great.
Haven't seen a whole lot of rain yet.
That happened to me my first visit too, and they said it was in July, and the people I was with said, "Just come back in November." I came back in November. It wasn't the same, but it was still beautiful.
Yep. So we're glad to be here. The family all made the move, and now we're just finding our bearings and looking for a place to settle in town. It's good times. But thanks for having me on the Game Audio Hour. Good to be here.
Man, I'm so glad you're here. It's actually one of your podcasts was one of the podcasts that made me think I got to do this.
Right on.
So I did want to ask you before I forget and go to Alex. Sorry, Alex. Where did you move from when you went to Seattle? Going to Seattle from where?
Yeah, it's a long and storied career, but essentially made the jump from Minneapolis. Which, it's a longer story there, but this is actually my first in-house job. I'm working with PopCap here in Seattle, and I've been freelance since I took a step into the industry about 7 or 8 years ago.
Oh, that's great.
So did that back and forth to the Bay Area, San Francisco, and Minneapolis again, and before now winding up out here.
Well, coming to us from the furthest away is Alex, all the way from Japan. Hi, Alex.
Hi, well, they've got 5 of you guys from West Coast of America, so I'm doing my best to hold up the entire other side of the planet. The entire population. There's probably more people over this side than there is over that side if you count China and India and all of that. So you guys better give me some respect. Yeah. Heavy weight.
I keep interrupting. The only reason the Earth moves is because you guys walk. There's so many people there.
That's right. I'm sorry I missed the gang lunch. I got held up at the airport. They wouldn't give me a ticket on the spot,
Yeah, I wondered where you were. I didn't see you all night.
Yeah. I was banging my fist on the counter at the airport saying, "Give me a ticket," but they don't do that. So.
Well, I have to admit that I spent the last 2 or 3 days recovering from the Neversoft funeral, which I went to on Friday to say goodbye to the company I used to work for and all of those people. It was an amazing experience, as soon as I walked into the place where it was held, it was a bar we held down regularly. It's a pool hall kind of bar that it was just a couple blocks away, and it was always lunch or whatever for us. And so I walked in, and it was like I'd never left. So many of the familiar faces were there that I couldn't determine who was still there, who had not left Neversoft. And so I had to ask people, "You still at Neversoft?" That's awesome. And I mean, I wish I would have been there really much earlier, where they burned this giant eyeball on a stick effigy out in the parking lot. I didn't make it there soon enough, but I was invited, and I appreciate them doing that. And one of my favorite videos I saw online is the gift that Joel, I don't know if you ever met Joel Jewett, he's an awesome, awesome guy, handlebar mustache, always wore shorts and hiking boots and a vest and some sort of baseball cap. He's always got camouflage on. He's from Montana, and he's just a no BS kind of guy, and he's just an amazingly talented guy who can get a business together and just do some amazing things. Made great choices throughout the career, Neversoft's entire existence. And anyway, so he gave everybody in his style a enormous Bowie knife that had Neversoft, a real, not plastic, not some sort of Hollywood schlock, tchotchke kind of thing. It was a Bowie knife. And there's this video of him taking the knife and just throwing it into one of the cork boards that we always put all kinds of stuff all over for, like, design or photographs or art or whatever. It's a great video. He just one throw, bam, right in the wall. Then somebody took a picture of it close up. Pretty awesome. Then they went out back and he shot the eyeball with flaming arrows. And then they all went to the bar and shut her down. As a matter of fact, we didn't really technically get kicked out of the bar, but they stopped serving us. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, kind of thing. So we went across the street to someplace else. But then I'm a responsible father, and I went home like a good old person. But it was great to see everybody. I couldn't believe it. It was just an amazing experience, and all that energy, all that crazy irreverent Guitar Hero days was immediately right there. I know they're working on Call of Duty and stuff, but I don't know, it just felt like the same old days from Guitar Hero. So Tony Hawk showed up, which was a pretty amazing thing, to say goodbye to the company that helped his game. Anyway, so that's enough about that. But the good news is that 99.9% of the employees got transferred under Infinity Ward now, which is 2 blocks away, and they had a whole empty floor. So now Neversoft has a floor to themselves, full of all these talented Neversofties. Even though the building is shut down, the name is gone, the talent remained. And I got to give props to Activision for making that move.
That's a cool way to do it.
Good job, Activision.
Best case scenario on that is when all your people end up back at a good place or still working.
That's
like yesterday.
So true, and I couldn't believe it happened. It was good for them. Good for them. I'm so glad Activision did it. I got to say, you can tell by my attitude that I was expecting Activision to do some heavy cuts, and they didn't, and I'm proud of them. So, but hey, that's enough of that news. Let's move on to something that blew up all over Facebook, and Vince brought it to my attention. I'm glad he did. Vince, do you want to make the introduction? It basically was a composer who got replaced by a company who offered to do the same work for free. Now, if I understand correctly, she got paid for the work that she had done, but she lost the gig?
Right. It's really interesting. So first off, for the full context, it's a Kickstarter, or the project started out as a Kickstarter a few years back. And the composer had a relationship with these guys, or at least she thought she did. And after a while of working on it, another company, and here in the story, the company is put in quotes. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, but another company or another party approaches the developer and says, "We will do your 60-minute soundtrack for free." And with that, the developer decides that because of money issues, which are known to not just the developer, but for other people who are following the Kickstarter, to the composer, that they're going to take them up on it. So the composer is going to be compensated a little bit for the work that she had done previously, but she is out of this particular gig. Thankfully she's been around for a while, and there are other gigs for her. But that's still a really big blow to watch your gig get taken by another person that does the whole soundtrack for free. Just sends an email, little cold call there.
And they said they're a company? What kind of company offers to do something for free?
I don't know exactly.
Well,
who
like
knows
Vince,
the details?
yeah, but I mean, like Vince said, you can put company in quotes. It could be for kids that are 17 years old, for all we know. It could be, it could be just the worst possible scenario. Like, and in the Facebook thread where this all happened, a lot of people were pretty much saying the same thing: as these people are going to get what they paid for. Especially. Like if you're a company and you're getting a bunch of music for free, how many revisions do you feel comfortable asking for?
Yeah, right.
And as a someone giving music for free, how many revisions are you expecting to give? I mean, it seems like a take it or leave it situation.
Jack, I take you seriously with that new lower third you have there.
Well, you're gonna have to.
Jack Menhorn at hackmenhorn.tumblr. Oh, Jack. So I heard somebody saying something. Was that you, Alex? Were you?
Yeah. The thing about discussions like this, it's almost like comparing business models with games. When you release a paid game versus a free-to-play game, the important thing to consider is that all of this discussion happens based on the assumption that the quality is the same. But that, of course, is not the case. I mean, if you're gonna, if you're comparing a paid game, exactly the same game that you pay for, $5 to play it, or exactly the same game which is, say, free to play, completely free, maybe with ads or something, then you can have a discussion. But if you're just comparing one game which is paid and another completely different game which is free, they're not really on the same level to begin with. So then we're talking about audio assets. I would say it's the same thing. If you're talking about exactly the same music offered for free versus paying a market rate for that music, then you can have a discussion. But in this case, because, firstly, in this discussion we have no idea about the quality of this free 60 minutes worth of music, it's difficult to then just sort of say, it's difficult to feel that is that much of a threat. I mean, for all we know, it could be 60 minutes of utter crap. And if with that in context, then okay, sure, if it's free and if you're happy with that crap in your game, go ahead. But if you want quality music from a quality composer who is sensitive and who is listen and work with you to find a good direction from the artistic point of view, all the extra things that you get when you pay for something, then you're sort of comparing on an equal level. So I think quality is a really important thing to bring into play into this discussion. And when we don't know the quality of what the composer was going to do and what this free company was going to give out, it's a bit difficult to sort of compare them on an equal footing, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it is because of your skill set that you're charging money. So there is a presumption in my mind that if something is free, I'm not going to get the full quality. But it's really on the company the game makers to say, no, we're a Kickstarter, funds are low for us, we're struggling already for money. Every Kickstarter seems to say that at the end. So I don't find that as an excuse to go with free. I think that you should do what every other Kickstarter I've ever been involved in does, and that's seek other investments outside. Start a web page where people can still sign up for your for the game just using the same reward system as Kickstarter, but not through Kickstarter. It's totally legal, and I've seen most people do that. There are ways to continue to make money so that you can pay the people who are on the project. I think it comes down to the company.
I think it reflects ethically poorly on the company to, in this case, whether they involve the composer as part of the Kickstarter or not. Certainly, if they did, how do you switch horses midstream, promise something up front as part of the Kickstarter, and then change over to a different resources, a different composer, company, artist, whatever. So on one hand, it reflects poorly on that whole process, and at the same time, I feel like as just a cog in the machine creating a game, you know, you don't have much of a voice outside of, you know, again, a Facebook post or whatnot in order to communicate with the backers. The developer, again, whatever her relationship was with them heading into the whole process, is holding all the cards as far as communicating that to their backers and, you know, justifying their choice in whatever way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be curious to see if they've even announced it on their Kickstarter page.
To piggyback on what Damian was saying is two things to also keep in mind is that this company, presumably, because I know this composer and I know she would be smart enough to have a contract, is the developer is not honoring a contract.
Mm.
It's like, yeah, they might be paying her for what she has done, but they've also agreed on her doing more than that amount, and so they're just not doing that. And
looks like we have her in the chat room right now.
Yeah, we do. And also, I would like to point out that I assume that you know, she was announced to be part of the Kickstarter, and she probably used her considerable fan base to help push the Kickstarter and push the project forward. Imagine if the next superhero movie comes out and says, "Hey, we have John Williams doing the score," and then they spend months and months talking about how they're going to get John Williams to do the score.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, midstream, they decide, yeah, they're like, "Oh no, well, we ran out of money because we wanted Ben Affleck, so we're going to get Kyle Johnson to do the music instead
for free."
Two mistakes.
for free.
Pro bono.
Yeah.
So the company is profiting on using this composer for a little while and then going, "Oh well, you know, money's a thing." So, but they're a company ideally who is making a product, so they should know how to have budgeted out something they agreed on with this composer. And now they're going to, in some respect, profit off of her name while using this other company that they're probably not going to be talking about too much.
Yeah.
So I think we all agree that, you know, this is not a good situation, and the developer is, you know, I mean, you know, they had a relationship there, and there was an agreement. Maybe it was only a verbal agreement, but it was still an agreement that was broken. And okay, so this is a lost gig, but how does one actually compete with free?
Yeah.
Well, I think you're hitting the nail on the head, though. It's a relationship, right? So I guess maybe that opens this up to a bigger question of when you are forging these relationships with startup developers, you know, how do you show your value and find the right intersection, right? I mean, again, is only a startup developer willing to wade into the waters of free help because they're unaware of what the cost of that free help is? Because I worked on a lot of free projects on my way into the industry, whether it was modding or small teams of teenagers trying to rock something, and you know, very few of those actually saw the light of day at the time. And even though we were all working for free, certainly I think we all can agree that there is a cost to working for free, and
yeah. Well, you know. I just wanted to say that Anastasia's in the chat room. She's kind enough to, she didn't mind that we used her name, so we don't have to use all that third person kind of stuff. So Anastasia Devana, I hope I'm saying your last name right. I'm sorry if I messed that up. But and I'm going to announce her website later so that people listening will know that there's a quality person out there, even in getting the shaft. As far as I'm concerned, I don't mind calling that because I think it's pretty crappy. She took it on the up and up, you know. She could have, like Jack was saying, maybe there's a contract she could have held tight to. You know, she's like, you win some, you lose some. I thought it was really cool that she was kind enough to say she felt happy that they had they had paid her for the work that she had done. Sorry, I'm checking two things at the same time while I'm talking. But yeah, in the end, and I guess we've kind of covered it. It's a really crappy thing for the developer to do. It's a dangerous thing if you have a contract in place because people can use that against you. And I had mentioned there are some times, there are some circumstances where it has happened and it had to happen, and that happened to me in a project earlier. But this isn't about me. But I just wanted to allude back to that. Where I had been working on a gig because their composer disappeared, and then he reappeared halfway through my work, and I got paid anyway, which I thought was really cool. But in this case, this is not cool. This is just taking the easy way out. Somebody says they're going to do it for free. Be careful what you get for free. I guess that sums it all up, huh?
Here's a proactive element that we can maybe add to the discussion for the benefit of maybe the younger composers who are wondering how they can avoid being victimized in this way. And one way you can lower your exposure to risk like this is through your contract. And I know that sometimes people feel intimidated about putting forth a contract or feeling like they're being persnickety or hard to work with, but that's never true. You should always have a contract, and you should have it signed, even if it feels like it's a little bit of a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And in the contract, you should stipulate that some portion of your creative fee is offered to you up front, be it 1/3 or a quarter or something, just so that there is a extension of goodwill from the part of the developer. If they don't entirely feel confident that you're the right composer, well, they shouldn't be hiring you in the first place, so they shouldn't feel bad about apportioning off some amount of this to pay you for the startup cost in terms of your time and creative energy, the time you're spending writing themes and assembling an instrumental palette and just soaking into the project, and that's time that you should be paid for, so that if during Q number 3 they say, oh wow, we got a better offer from two 17-year-olds who are calling themselves a company, well, at least you got your third up front. So this is a good example of why you should have a contract, even if it's with someone with whom you have a good working relationship, and maybe even especially in those cases.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of curious, we all work in the industry. How many contracts have you guys signed? Do you always sign a contract? Have you always?
Oh, good. This can blend right into talking with you, Damian, about what's going on with your independent career as well, doing sound design and implementation. I want to mention before I forget, Anastasia Devana is just how it is spelled. It's www.ANASTASIADEVANA.com. Look her up. Really super talented. So, Damian, you brought up a fantastic point about contracts. Every gig I've ever worked on had a contract.
90%? For me, maybe 90%. There have been a few, I don't know, I want to say 6 or 7 in the last few years, just little things. Be like, oh, it's an iOS game, and I'm just doing this really little thing, and I want to do some stuff, and it's a little bit of money changes hands, a little bit of work on my time over the course of a week, boom. But anything more than that, I do want to make sure that there's a contract in place. I actually did make a mistake a few years back working with a person who, quite honestly, I thought was a friend, and we started working together, and I put a lot of work into it, and he was asking a lot from me, and I decided, well, we really should have a contract in place because, this is just one of a couple of jobs that I'm doing at the moment. I want to make sure that I'm allocating my time properly, that you know how much of me that you're getting for this project, et cetera, et cetera. And I insisted that we do a contract. And he balked at that, and he kept on pushing it off. And after a while, I said, if you really don't want to put anything in place, or maybe it really is the fact that you just don't want to pay me, well, I'm just going to have to walk away. And, that happened, and that's unfortunate.
That's too bad. That's a good point you brought up, though, about contracts if you're getting paid, right? I mean,
I think the tipping point was, how big of a project is it? How big of a deal do you need to make of having a contract? Because if it's the week of work, month of work, short-term gig, maybe that's moving too fast to slow down for a contract, or maybe it's not worth it if it's, I don't know, $10, $20, $200, whatever your baseline
threshold.
Yeah. So,
but it protects both you and them. That's my sell on contracts. I always say, because I get balked, constantly get balked at, and I always say, this is in place to protect you as well, so that I guarantee you, this many assets or these 2 or 3 compositions. So if I were to become a flake, which I'm not, but that's the selling point is, and I disappear on you like a composer did in that example earlier I was talking about, that you've got some legal recourse to come get what you're supposed to get, and that usually turns them around a little bit, because I don't think a lot of people think about contracts being, duplex, going in 2 different directions.
They absolutely are, because if you do not have a contract, then you own all the copyright to the music that you've written, and they do not. So it's absolutely in your client's interest to make sure they have a contract, because they're probably going to want to do work for hire, or at least they're going to want to have the right to use the music in their game. I mean, you could theoretically, without a contract, you could probably throw a monkey wrench in the works of what they're trying to do, especially if use on a website or a promo or something like that. Yeah. So it should not be hard to get at least a simple deal memo. Like we're talking about a page long. It doesn't have to be a giant legalistic document. It can almost be everyday language with just a little bit of formality to make it rigorous. And if someone doesn't want to sign a contract, run. And I think Vince did the right thing in the story he was describing.
Can I pose a question? Just coming back to Vince's original question about what audio professionals can do in the face of free assets. I guess in today's day and age, the tools are all there. There are plenty of free assets out there, plenty of free sounds, there's free music. All the tools are easy to use, and it's not that difficult to set the audio and the music up in your game by yourself without an audio professional helping you. Just scale the free resources. Oh, that piece of music will do. That sounds good. That fits my game, and there you go. You're done. So my question is, do you guys feel that it is adequately obvious to developers out there what they pay for when they hire an audio professional?
No.
No.
Well, then, what can we do then to make sure that game developers know when you pay this much for an audio professional, this is what you get beyond just going out and sourcing free stuff and just slamming it together yourself? What can we do to make sure that people know that?
I try to keep that to time. If you have a professional do it, your quality is going to be at a certain level, guaranteed. But how quickly they can reach that level or go beyond that level is their level of professionalism, and so their experience in their profession. And when you so if somebody says, "Hey, Kyle, you're expensive," I say, "Yeah, but you're gonna have me for half the time you're gonna have somebody else." So in the end, it's a wash, and the quality though will suffer. So the quality's here and I'm short, or the quality's here and it's long, and you pay the same amount of money. So that's what I try to do. Does that make sense?
Get there faster. Yeah.
That's what you're paying.
It's an advocacy trip, right? As the freelance, as the contract, as the resource, it's an advocacy trip to be able to quantify that for someone, right? Yeah. It's part of that relationship, There's more ways than just financial ways that you come to an agreement with someone to do work on their project, right? And I guess it's part of that conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now, Damian, in your own time as a freelancer, is that something you had to do, advocate as a technical sound designer, to say, hey, if you bring me on as a technical sound designer, I'm going to be able to free up resources in your own sound designers, as well as I can be the interface between the design and the sound team in making it come together? Did you have to perform your own sort of education and advocacy to potential clients?
I would say yes, absolutely. I was lucky to, on my way into the industry, be shepherded by some very experienced folks working out of the Bay Area Sound. Julian Kwasniewski, Jared Evanston Johnson, Dave Levison were all part of the first project that I worked on. And it was exactly that situation where I was in the middle of all this content coming in from every direction to serve as the kind of fulcrum that it all pivoted on. And that was definitely a sell to the developer who didn't quite understand the need for that, and so I was, again, lucky enough to have their experience with how to advocate for and budget the resources to be able to have that, have me working in that capacity. So yes, it's a huge advocacy trip, because the technical sound design thing, I don't know what the general vibe is out in the world now, but at the time you had composers, you had sound designers, and you had implementers.
Mm-hmm.
And implementer is kind of a dirty word in some circles, because it really meant, the low person on the totem pole who needed to get chops so that they could go on to be a sound designer or a composer or something other than an implementer. And I might have felt that a little bit. And again, this is where the advocacy became really important, and it became important to really quantify what that service was. And there's a lot of people doing it now. There were a lot of people on my way in who I was, glad to align myself with, vision-wise, who were working in the same capacity, and I like to think that it has gotten some legs over time, and is seen now as a legitimate career path and not just a stopping ground on the way to becoming something else.
I hear you.
That was a little bit of a long-winded answer to the question, but
good.
But yes, absolutely, you have to own your passion and be able to convey it in a way that people who are not audio can understand and see the value of it.
Yeah.
I guess that's where I'm at.
That's hard to do, though, because every studio is different. I can imagine all of the preliminary research you have to do to say, well, if I'm understanding this correctly, so you would say, I'm saving you money by doing this, and you have to understand what their present process is and why they would, why you're a better option, right?
Right, and it comes down to just, it becomes the no-worry solution is what you try to offer. I don't know how it has been for you guys coming in and doing maybe smaller projects or small to mid-sized projects with developers who maybe have never had an audio department, don't have an audio department, maybe never worked with audio before. But what was a common theme is that a developer maybe just expected that you turn the faucet and out came audio, right?
That's what Jack says. He says he's an email from which audio spills out of. Was that you, Jack, or was that Mike?
No, that was last week. That was Gerard last week. He said that.
Oh, Gerard.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
Just send an email and instant music.
Yeah.
And so, you do have to provide that. It has to be easy. And the way that you sell that is by making it so, I guess.
Yeah.
And you try to, within whatever kind of configuration of outsourced solution you are, whether you're the one person doing everything, or like I worked with Bay Area Sound for a lot of years, a very small slice of a larger solution, which included the different components as part of a team. At the end of the day, you justify it by making the developer's life easier.
Yeah, that's your main focus, and just find a way to do that, huh?
And you kind of hope that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like the more you do that, the more they realize that they can't live without that, and then you hope that relationship grows in trust and strength, so that through those, whether it's weeks, months, years of development, you can rely on each other for the support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I don't know. How about the rest of you? I mean, how do you find a way to position your services and find a place where the developer understands?
I think that's very right on. I mean, I certainly I've been thinking about it not exactly in those terms, but as I've been working with various developers over the years, um, if you're a music composer and if the only reason you connect with a developer is because of the style of music that you have, well, that's kind of a limitation.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you connect with them because the way that you work connects, really interlaces with how they work, and not just on a high level, but on a lower level, like, oh, here is their pipeline, and here are their people, and here's how they work, and I work with the creative director in this way, and I communicate with the artist in this way, and you can connect in multiple ways, and not just, oh, this music fits what this game is or wants to be. Being very aware of these people as not just guys that make a game, but as game developers. And that's why, for me, I actually really value being a game developer, and I actually care a lot about implementation, and I have for a long time, and that's why I try to do my own implementation as much as I can when I first started out in this business. I think it's really quite important because that's the ultimate. That's how it's in implementation that you really connect with everyone else that's working on this game.
Well, speaking of starting out that way, Damian, what was your start? What got you into it? What made you decide this is what you wanted to do?
I guess it was that question, and my wife asked me this, and it come to find years later that Alan Watts has a famous story about it as well. But she basically asked me, if I could do anything and get paid, what would it be? And this was at kind of a critical time in my life, and I said, well, make weird noises. And she's like, well, don't people get paid to do that? And I guess it was just a little light bulb moment for me. But from there, the question was, so how do people make money making weird noises? And that was a process for me. I sat down and I did all kinds of investigative research, went to the library, checked out books, read about things, and did a deep dive on it, eventually leading to this idea of being the one-person show for a game. Did some sound design, did some music. Whoa, that was terrible. Don't want to do that again. And eventually there was an epiphany moment with one project that I was working on where the game programmer schooled me after getting a build back, which all the sounds I had created truncated after each iteration. So it was instance limited to one, right? Kill oldest in our fancy new school terminology, right? But at the time, it was all like behind the scenes magic. Didn't know what that meant, and so when I realized that there was more to making sounds than just making cool sounds, that's when I really when it really took off for me, and I just dived deep into that question. How do you make good sounds sound good?
So you were a sound designer who then went to implementation? Is that what I understand?
I wouldn't even say so much. I would say that I was trying a little bit of everything to see what felt good.
Yeah.
And I don't think I did much good sound design, to be honest. I'm sure I didn't do any good music for games.
Oh, you're being too modest, I'm sure of it.
But again, it's like when you find your passion, right? It stares you in the face and you realize, there's nothing else I can do but this. And for me, it was not a question of, is this going to work? It was a question of, how can I make this work? Because it was clearly the part that I enjoyed the most. And like I said, at the time, it wasn't like there was, we've seen technical sound design jobs come up now. It's become a legitimized profession of sorts.
Good.
But at the time it was very much, not bona fide, but I guess I couldn't imagine doing anything else. So
every time I play a game and I illegally go behind the game like I'm not supposed to and start looking for audio files for phone ringtones or whatever, I would always run into this issue where they'd have a different tag or they'd be hidden in some sort of... And that's when I realized, hey, there's people putting these sounds in here and hiding them.
Yeah.
Who's that guy? Who is that guy who's thwarting my efforts to make my phone sound like Neverwinter Nights? What's that guy doing? But
or the other thing, right? You dig into that source file, and really to get the sound you want out of that directory, you need to smush 3 different things on top of each other in order to get the resulting output of that, right? And for me, that's the art there. For me, that's the sound design. That's the challenge, is how to dynamically recombine that stuff to get the diversity out of it. And that's the art to me.
That's cool. Now, when you started off, did you start off as a musician? If I understand correctly, you and Mike Shapiro have known each other a really long time. Did you guys both play in Prince's band in Minneapolis? Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. You're going
This was back when Mike had the Jerry curl perm. You have pictures of that still, right?
Yeah, and strangely, Damian was still bald. It was weird.
All just gravity the whole time. It just goes downward.
I have to say, for those people not watching the show, that in the green room, Mike said he was going to make up some sort of history of knowing Damian, so I thought I would help out a little bit there.
This is good.
The script that I wrote. Good work.
Yeah, we're no good at sticking to the script.
Oh, I hear you. So when you're doing the mushing together, and guys, I'm sorry if I will, this will be my last question until we get to the Saboteur, which was unbelievably, I loved that game so much. You have no idea. But you can see my studio. I actually designed my studio off of the cover screen of the Saboteur. When I saw that red and gold, I was like, oh, that's me.
Nice.
Anyway, so when you're smushing those sounds together, do you do that through a middleware? Or do you, well, I should say it this way, when those 3 sounds in your example are pulled apart, those 3 files are pulled apart, is the middleware doing that, or do you have to write code to do that?
I've admitted this publicly before. I'm not a sound designer, and I'm not a programmer.
So the middleware handles this.
So I was lucky enough to also kind of come into the industry at a time when middleware was starting to get a firm root, and it was FMOD had been around for a while and was embedded in the indie scene as well as AAA. And that same year that I hit my first GDC, Audio Kinetic was showing off Wise for the first time.
What year was that?
2006.
Yeah. I got a shirt I still wear from that night.
It was the last year in San Jose. And
yeah, that is.
It was, so my entire, I guess, philosophy, career, what have you, is based on this accessibility to this kind of design, right? Yeah. And I guess I would pose the same question to everyone else, right? It's like, I know some of you might have tracker experience, but really, would you, and some of you probably write sheet music with notes on paper, but really I wonder, do you feel like as a composer you are really enabled by DAWs and your digital tool sets?
Well, DAWs nowadays are crap for video game work, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, they really are. There's so many things that I want to do, but and actually what ends up happening is I know what I can do in FMOD, either with FMOD Designer or something lower level, writing some code, and I have to go through hoops in order to make my actual DAW put out the assets in the structure needed in order to make a piece of music work. Yeah.
But you are ultimately, let's say, defined by your tool set, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And it's like I guess the analogy I'm trying to make here is that I could code, or I could go write notes on a piece of paper, but ultimately I'm empowered by audio middleware to do what I love to do. And I guess I'm trying to make the same analogy over on the composition or even sound design side. You know, you can go out with a microphone, you can record a sound, but ultimately you have this DAW, you have Live or Bitwig that you jump into to create content, and that eventually ends up in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that tool relationship that I guess for me defines me.
Yeah.
And whether it's middleware or proprietary, whatever it is.
I mean, I agree completely, but what would you say to like some I usually hear this from people at big studios where they can have their own proprietary system. I hear a lot of, you know where I'm going with this. You get some sound designers and developers kind of belly aching that there's a homogenization of game audio now because there's all these developers using Fmod and Wise and are only thinking in terms of Fmod and Wise, whereas they're wanting to do some super cool things that are different, and so they're able to build their own scripting systems, or they're able to build their own audio engines that can do exactly what they want, rather than having to live in the confines of Wise or Fmod. So what would you say to those people that view Wise and Fmod and common middleware solutions as a hindrance rather than an evolution?
I guess to make a quick analogy, I feel like, you know, are we saying that all music created with Pro Tools sounds the same? Are we saying that it's all defined similarly and it's only good at one thing? So there's one counterpoint to that. The other thing is that I think that a ready-made audio engine, okay, whether it includes a GUI toolset or not, undoubtedly will get a developer there faster. Okay, whether they're using vanilla Unity, whether they've kludged in OpenAL, or they are leveraging the source engine in a Half-Life 2 mod, right? It will get you there faster. And even within, let's say, the experienced technical sound designer position with an existing tool set, you still have the capability to take into account what the game is doing and write systems that are specific to the game, leveraging the technology in the audio engine. So I feel like, you know, it's a question of where is your money better spent? Rebuilding the wheel, creating a new audio engine from nothing, or customizing a system based on the game that you're making and really getting your value by making that special, using an already existing engine.
There's a question in the chat from Matt M. He was asking, what did you use for implementation early on?
Great question. So I kind of, like I said, fell in love with it. So early on, when I was just starting out, I worked on a game called Zero AD for a while, and they had OpenAL under the hood, and so we wrote this tiny little XML tool to randomize wave files, right? And like, again, huge barrier up front to convince the developer that you need to randomize wave files.
Oh, wow.
Much less that you need to pitch it or volume it.
Oh.
You know. So again, you have to create this specialized tool. You still have an engine under the hood that came from Creative Labs. But so there's an example where, you know, we rebuilt the wheel because again, the option was free. So that ties back around to that. How much does free cost?
Yeah.
But so from there, you know, I investigated things like ISACT, which was a tool that actually, interestingly, Rob Blake brings up in his interview with Brad Dick on Designing Sound here this last week. They used ISAC on the first Mass Effect.
Mm.
Wasn't that the Creative Labs one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that blew me away. It's so much dialogue, and it's a full sci-fi game. Plus, it's a Bioware game that has all of that dialogue tree system, and it's in such an archaic system.
Yep. Well, and again, that's back to this idea that work within your constraints, but get there faster because you've taken something that already exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we experimented with ISAC. Again, great experience. I've done the Exact dance. I've shipped about a dozen projects with Fmod Designer, and probably just as many with Wise by now. But the Saboteur was my first Wise game.
Whoa.
So, and I was tangentially involved with it outside the fence through Barrier Sound again. Andrew
Nice.
Cheney was the audio lead on that, who's now down at Gearbox. And it was a super unique situation, right? Here we are up in the headlands of Mount Tamalpais in Marin County, San Francisco, and down at Pandemic in Westwood, they're making this game. And they called in Barrier Sound as specialists to provide content for certain areas of the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got Julian and Dave shoveling assets over for physics systems or for vehicles, and right in the middle of that, I'm sitting with a build of the game. I'm dropping their content into Wise and hooking it up to make it work right. Working with Andrew to get things from the game engine that I need. So sorry to segue into that, but yeah.
No. I could go on and on about that game. That was an amazing game, and I was so sad to see the studio shut down right after that.
That was brutal.
Yeah. They released one, in my opinion, their best game, and then out the door. Oh.
It had a unique hook, right? I mean, it's interesting to see the evolution of that kind of game now moving forward. Again, I think that Infamous did that whole parkour thing very well. The Mirror's Edge, just on and on, right? But at the time, that kind of movement-based game was not such a big thing, right? You've got your Assassin's Creeds and your Prince of Persias now, and
They definitely looked into the past, but just made it better, and now that has been taken and moved forward without them. But one of my favorite parts of that game was visually as well. Whenever you dealt with the Nazis, it was this black and white, ugly, kind of dreary place, and then when you would liberate it, it would turn into color. And I thought, man, that's brilliant. Did you guys play that game other than me and Damian?
No.
I did not actually. I mean, I remember it looking cool, and I remember reading all sorts of news surrounding it because it was Pandemic's last game, but I didn't get a chance to play it at that time.
It's still good today. So, who else has got questions for Damian? I don't want to jump in on mine without you guys getting a shot.
Well, you're in-house now. You're working with those dudes after... you were not in-house when you worked on Peggle, right?
I was not. That's correct.
And by the way, that's a real bang-up job on Peggle too. By the way.
Heck yeah.
Well, I'm not taking much of the credit for that. Guy Whitmore, of course, is behind the music system for it, and Jacqueline Shoemate was the audio lead. And again, everything is a team effort, but it was great to be part of the team. And again, I fell in right there in the middle, just trying to tie things together to make them sound great. So.
Great job.
Yeah, so how's it going to be now? Now that you're in house.
Great question. I think that one thing that where I had come to in my career is, I was always trying to reconcile this idea of being on site with being remote. And while I felt like I could do a lot of good work remote, and you probably feel like this is composers as well and sound designers, you can do a lot of great work back in the laboratory. It seemed to be over time that in order to do the best job that I could at this intersection between content and the game, it really, I felt like, for me, made the most sense to be on site. And there was a time when I was okay with the trade-off. Okay, I don't need to be there. I can get good things done from the lab, and I'm okay that it's not that the communication is not as good as it could be, or that I can't just walk over to the programmer and whack them on the head until they change something for me, right?
Fill them with pizza until they produce something.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Or have the random kitchen conversation where all of a sudden they come up with this feature you've never heard of, and you're like,
it's awesome.
This is amazing. Here's what I'm going to do, right? I'll never forget working on The Force Unleashed 2. Okay, and it's towards the end of production, and middle of the night, and they're really tight with what they would let you check in, right? Game's about to ship, and so every change that you made had to be justified with a bug, right? And the bugs were prioritized, and if they didn't think it was important, it fell off, right? But it just so happened I had the designer over to the desk, and he's trying to help me rig this spaceship that swooped in on a cutscene. And at the same time, he's digging through the text file where we're hooking up the sound. He's like, "Oh, funny." And that's the part where if you hit 3 stormtroopers in a row with this ball in this one room, you get a achievement called the 10-pin knockout. And I'm like, that sounds cool. We should probably have it make some kind of bowling sound, don't you think?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, yeah, that'd be so awesome. And I was like, okay, well, check it out. I got a bug to check this file in for the spaceship. Let's just put this in there. And, they won't even know that I've put a new WAV file into the global sound bank because it's just the global sound bank. I'm just iterating, right?
Nice.
And so at the end of the day, that shipped. But that's the kind of magic that happens, I feel like, when you are on site. So I was, for me, just looking to reclaim some of that magic.
Yeah, it is cool, all the stuff that happens that, when you're remote, you're not going to know about it through an email or a conference call or anything like that. It just happens. And it's so fun to have those little surprises and bits of joy that happen during development.
I agree. And
though, a regular paycheck and health insurance will make you go soft.
Trust me, I've been wondering about that. So I'll let you know how it goes.
I'm teasing. It's just a false fear of the independent person, right? That they go in-house and they can't work on all these projects and their skill set will get limited. It's like, no, there's so much to do, man. Your skill set doesn't suffer. And so many new people to learn stuff from.
Yeah, well, that's the great part. I guess I had wondered for years, how it is that a lot of times the most vocal parts of the community are the freelance part of it, and certainly I guess I felt that as myself, but there's so many game audio people who are sequestered away in their tiny caves who don't come out, and I miss them, right? Because even if I know them personally or see them around here and there at a meetup or whatnot, it's still not enough of them. And for every one that I know, there's another 10 who I've never met and would love to hear their perspective on things. And so I hope to circumvent that as an in-house person and continue to have some kind of output.
That's awesome. So speaking of what you had just said, you're very forthcoming with all of your knowledge too, which I think is fantastic about the game audio community. Is we'll tell you what you want to know. There's no secrets because I've used this in the past, and my dad always said, "A rising tide raises all ships." And so, I think that's fantastic. What caused you to? Is it just in your personality to want to give all that? And also, what happened that caused you to start your podcast, Game Audio Podcast?
So I guess it is part of my personality. I do believe that that we can get there faster. Again, if we talk about these things, if we share our experiences, and if we actively try to help people into the industry, we have only good to come from more people getting involved with game audio, because I've always felt like it's cultivating more people to talk to, right? And I'm a sucker for that. And I guess where the podcast ended up coming in is that, once a year, the Game Developer Conference happens in San Francisco. There's lots of them all over the world, so, I don't mean to pinpoint just that one. But if you go to one of these conferences, you immediately feel like your head explodes with all the information and the conversations, and it's all you can do to make it through the week before your head explodes, and you spend months processing it afterward. And for Anton and I, this became a theme where what we really wanted to do is try to find ways throughout the year to extend that conversation. And again, the Game Audio Hour is a great example of exactly that. It's we're all just trying to keep up that spirit of education and collaboration. I feel like even though I've been doing a lot of talking, I feel like we are collaborating in this as something that hopefully will give someone the ability to feel like they have the courage, strength, know-how, or passion to pursue.
Isn't that the truth? Is to give them the confidence to go on to their dreams. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I'd add to that, just bringing it back to the topic of today, I'd add to that the more that we do to promote our community and to stick together and to enhance the art of game audio design, I think the more that we do that, the more that the game designers take notice, and that they realize that, well, geez, yes, I could go and get a whole bunch of free assets myself, but if we want to do it properly, we pay the money and we get a professional to do it for us. And if we're all just sort of antisocial, introverted recluses sitting in our studios, not talking to anybody, just taking the emails and spitting out the music, then obviously it doesn't really give a good impression to the people that we want to work with. You get what you pay for, and you hire us, and you get great quality music tailored for your game, and that's basically it. And if you go for free, all the best. Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, it's 7:03. Do you guys have some last parting questions for Damian? I don't want to keep everybody too long.
Wow. Well, and what are you going to do in Seattle?
Wow. Well,
man, you've only been there
place
for
to live. How's that sound?
Oh, man. Well, where are you looking right now? Are you looking in the city, or are you...
Well, so, interesting thing, my family, we don't own a car. We haven't owned a car for, I guess, 4 years. And so, by choice. But one of the things that's really important to us is being within arm's reach of things. So we're angling towards the city lifestyle. But we've drawn a circle, 5 to 10 radius outside of, Seattle Center. And so kind of casting the net wide, because honestly, we go look at these houses in these different neighborhoods that we've never been to, and it's like, hey, this is kind of cool. And, I know someone that lives here. How are the schools? Oh, they're great. We love them. Or where do you get your groceries? And they're like, oh, yeah, right down here. And then the farmer's market. And, so I think we're just kind of spinning the roulette wheel and hoping for the best.
Hey, after the show is over, and I forgot to mention this, so I'm sorry I'm doing it on the air. We always stay on for like a post-show kind of thing. So when I say goodbye, don't close the window. I have a friend in LA who has a house for rent near downtown, so I'll let you know. And then I have another friend in West LA who you have to meet. He's awesome. He's my oldest friend. But did I say West LA? West Seattle.
Yeah.
So I guess I have 1,000 questions. It's been awesome having you on here, and I'm watching the panel of everybody just sit and listen, because this is the kind of podcast we would sit and listen to for sure.
Well,
I guess it's time to just say goodbye, as much as I don't want to. Is there anything more you can tell us about that you want to talk about? Is anything special going on you want to impart onto the airways before we hang up?
No, I mean, again, we got the Game Audio hashtag on Twitter.
Yes.
Game Audio podcast, and that library goes deep. Vince, you were on one of our podcasts.
Episode 3. That was wacky.
See? Yep.
Yeah.
And so we got a huge catalog of stuff to listen to. You guys are adding to your catalog here.
Oh, nothing like you guys have. I actually watch what you've done, and then I do it 10 weeks later.
Well, if we were that consistent, I think it'd be okay. But
I don't do that, so I'm not plagiarizing, I promise.
Gotcha. Right. So it's GameAudioPodcast.com, and then I don't know. Be good.
Yeah, be good to each other, right?
Yeah. Cool.
As I'm saying that, I really. Oh, so anyway, so with that, I will hang up. I'm sorry, we're ending in that weird kind of zone where we don't know how to say goodbye. So everybody, thanks for coming to the show. Chatties, thanks for watching, and thanks for participating in the chat room. I actually had to scroll through the names this time. Enough chatties to scroll. That's awesome. And then also, please follow us on Facebook, or on Twitter and Facebook. It's Game Audio Hour on everything that you can find. If you Google it, you'll see our website. You'll see our Twitter handle. In the show notes, I'll include all of Damian's information as well. And I think I covered it all. Like us on YouTube. Subscribe on YouTube. Like us on Facebook. I screw those up. But do the thing with the thing for the thing that you're in.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.